Good evening. Welcome to the Longmont Museum. My name is Justin Veach. I'm the manager of the museum's Stewart Auditorium, and I curate public programs. Thanks for coming out tonight. Do we have any people who are here for the first time ever in the history of their own lives? Wow. Hey, your lives will never be the same. I remember my first time. Before we get going, I want to thank a few folks who make our programming possible: the Scientific and Cultural Facilities District, the Stewart Family Foundation, the Friends of the Longmont Museum, and of course our museum members. Do we have any members with us this evening? Hey members, thank you. We simply can't do all that we do without you. If you're interested in finding out what it means to be a member of the Longmont Museum, please grab me or one of our staff after the program and we'll talk your ear off. And then you'll become a member instantly. Tonight's program, well, I should also welcome some folks who are joining us this evening from the Longmont Chamber of Commerce. You know who you are. Thanks for coming. And then I want to do a special thank you to our volunteers, to the Longmont Museum and Art and Public Places volunteers who are with us this evening. Thank you. We simply can't do all that we do without you. And then I want a special shout out to our usher this evening, who is also a volunteer, Sandra. Thank you. And I'd also like to thank our media sponsors, the mighty KGNU Community Radio out of dear old Boulder, which is just down the road if you didn't know, KUNC, and the Colorado Sound. Tonight's program is being offered as part of our Thursday Nights at the Museum series. Every Thursday night we offer something, a talk, a film, a performance, a concert, experimental puppetry, punk rock, Stravinsky, programs on gardening, you name it. Science programs. Anyway, it's a little bit of, I like to think of it as a cultural cornucopia, so to speak. Much of our programming is influenced or inspired by our current exhibition, which is a Picasso show. Who's seen the Picasso show? Great. It's still up. It'll be up through the end of May. It was extended, so all you folks who haven't caught it yet, you still have a chance. So all this winter we have been celebrating the historical avant-garde, France in the teens, 20s, and 30s. And so we thought, well, why not a program on Avant gardening? Get it? Cutting edge garden design? How do you like that? So we brought some really special friends of ours in. Please welcome our panelists this evening. Panel, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Emily Maeda, Bryan Fischer, and Kevin Philip Williams. Oh, we're playing musical chairs, it looks like. Kevin Philip Williams here is a naturalistic gardener who collaborates with active and passive materials to create dynamic and challenging worlds. His unique style combines bioregional plant palettes, a hardcore punk ethos, and post-human aesthetics to craft wild and captivating spaces. Kevin currently stewards the Step Garden, Conservation Garden, Lilac Collection, the Dwarf Conifer Collection, Josephine Streetscape, and the Willow Glade in celebration of Brandon Mandelbaum at Denver Botanic Gardens. Kevin's extensive work with the Denver Botanic Gardens has also led to the creation of celebrated public gardens throughout the city, including Summer Home Garden and Alien Dream Worlds at Meow Wolf Convergence Station. Kevin was a gardener on the High Line in Manhattan and studied as horticulture intern at Brooklyn Botanic Garden. It's a lot of gardens, ladies and gentlemen. He holds an MS degree in public horticulture from the Longwood Graduate Program at the University of Delaware and a BA degree in the history and philosophy of science from Bard College. Ladies and gentlemen, Kevin Philip Williams. Bryan Fischer there in the middle has been gardening since he could hold a shovel, which was that up until just recent? Was that recent? It's tricky. holding a shovel. His work as a plant person draws upon his nature-rich youth, informed by time on a family ranch in North Park, Colorado, as well as wild spaces and cultivated gardens around Fort Collins. Now curator of plant collection for the gardens on Spring Creek it's a community botanic garden with the city of Fort Collins, some of you may be aware. He tracks the institution's plant collections and advises staff regarding care and designs for the site. In addition to his work as curator, Bryan teaches and writes about plants and gardening while caring for 2 naturalistic gardens on the grounds, a rock garden and a half-acre prairie garden of his own creation, which has recently been featured in books and magazines highlighting naturalistic garden design. Bryan holds a BS in horticulture with a minor in interdisciplinary organic agriculture from CSU. Outside of his day job, Bryan recently authored a book with Lauren Springer on gardening with plants native to the Rockies and the Great Plains to be released in the spring of 2026. Maybe we'll have you back for that, maybe. The title, published by Timber Press, will be the Rocky Mountain Native Plant Primer. Ladies and gentlemen, Bryan Fischer. And last but not least, Emily Maeda, Vice President of Tree of Life Landscapes. She grew up outside of Boulder on her parents' farm, where she learned to love the beauty of Colorado's natural environment. Her love of plants quickly grew with forays into herb and flower gardens she designed and installed, and continued in her work at an organic farm. She pursued her education in piano performance at both the University of Colorado and Arizona State University, where she also took classes in landscape design. After moving from Arizona, she continued her love of piano, both teaching and performing. We may have to have you back for that as well, while at the same time pursuing design skills in landscape design. She worked with a landscape architect and founded Tree of Life Landscapes with her husband, Mark, with a deep desire to work with native, well-adapted plants and bring good design to the people. She has 7 children whom she loves deeply and continues to play and perform music, seeing congruence in the rhythm of music and the rhythm of good landscape design. In her free time, she loves to cook, run, read poetry and literature, and sit in the sun on her front porch. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our panelists.
Thanks so much for coming, everyone. We're really excited to talk about gardens. So excited to have so many people here interested in the topic of gardens. So I was just doing a little reading on the avant-garde. I always think it's good to start with definitions. Do you guys have a definition for the avant-garde?
I read about it, but it sounds like you did your research on it, so I'm going to let you run.
Kevin's got it. He's got one.
No, just roll. You're rolling.
I didn't realize that actually it was first coined in the early 1800s, kind of in response to industrialization, feeling like artists were on the avant-garde, leading society. So it was a reaction to sort of rampant industrialization. Seems fair. It means literally on the vanguard, like leading the troops. So, and it's usually, it's the people who are avant-garde. I mean, I guess I always think of the early 1900s and Paris. Mm-hmm. Is this what you all think of? Kevin? No?
I don't root it to a specific time and place, but I think since it's just sort of entered our, our vernacular, our zeitgeist, calling things the avant-garde,
Yeah.
It can be applied throughout time, yeah.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Right.
But don't you think of Picasso?
No.
You're supposed to say
sorry,
yes.
Totally,
Yes.
yeah, definitely.
But nonetheless, it's people thinking on the forefront of change. And it's generally, the avant-garde is not generally acceptable to sort of wider culture. Yeah?
Fair,
Yeah,
fair.
That's,
kind of a core
that's the core piece.
Yeah.
It's not really acceptable. It's not part of the vernacular.
Experimentalism seems like a very big part of it too.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Visual experimentalism.
Yeah.
Sure. Or thought experimentalism.
So, the question before us, are the slides going to rotate or am I going to advance? Okay, I'm going to go back because this is often when we think about modern design in gardens, when we have clients who call us and say, we want a modern design, this is kind of what they really want, but is it the avant-garde? So I give it to you. Is it the avant-garde? Can we do better? What is the avant-garde in garden design right now?
Sure.
I would almost pose the question, what is a garden at that point?
Oh dear, this is going to get really philosophical. This is going to be great. Okay.
Because I guess I see some of these quote unquote modern designs, and to me that's a yard.
Yeah.
That's not a garden.
Fair point.
And I feel like the definition of garden has really changed over the last few decades, where when people thought of a garden 50 years ago or 60 years ago, often it was like, this is the garden, this is the yard, there's a clean line, we use these plants in the garden, we use these plants in the yard.
Yard being sod.
Yeah, totally.
Yard being sod.
And as the like kind of expectation of like what we're doing to the earth is like our understanding of that's changing, it really feels like there is a growing awareness that maybe we don't need to be using the same plants, maybe the line between the garden and the wild space is getting blurrier. It seems kind of like we're increasingly looking at like maybe it hasn't trickled all the way down through the public perception of what a yard and a garden are, but in many ways like they seem like two different things to me, and garden in some instances is actually closer to like a wild space than it is where your kids can play on turf.
What would you say, Kevin?
I love the question of what a garden is, right? And I think by kind of definition or looking at like the actual meaning of the word garden, this is a pretty dang good garden, right? We're looking at a space that is subject.
Which one's a good one?
All of it, anything, right? Because we're looking at a space that is controlled by humans, right? By the intentions of humans. And whether, I think that really roots down to the base of it is what is our intention in the space? If it is actually to keep a monocultural turf grass lawn, then that is a garden. If it is to create an incredible wildflower super bloom, then that's also a garden. If it is to manage, millions of acres for buffalo and, forest and grazing, then that's also a garden. And I think you're totally right, Brian, when you said we are sort of getting back to the place where we can blur the lines, right, between the wild and the tamed, because we're sort of realizing that there maybe was never a wild, right, and that it's really just kind of this, honestly, very racist, prejudiced distinction that we came to places and saw them as unmanaged, right? Really, we need to get back to our deep relationship of managing all spaces and really consider the full breadth of a garden. Now, do I like the previous modern designs? Not particularly, right? That's not really my aesthetic. And I'm sure that the people who live there are not intentionally managing that. I think someone else is probably doing it for them, and also imposing some sort of heavy design or aesthetic on them that they don't really care about. And I think that's kind of the point where we fall apart, is the people don't care about the surroundings, and that's how we end up with something that, as the audience already chimed in, is very boring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because why is this considered modern? I mean, I think it's monochrome, which people tend to think is easier to read. But what connotates modern to us in this? Or why do people turn to that and say, oh, it's modern?
I think a lot of it is that you have a lot of clean lines and hard shapes, and it's very architectural. It's almost like echoing the mid-century house as a yard or a garden concept, which I think comes with its own set of like mental baggage when you do that, because it's kind of like all the little trickle down from like the politics of that whole thing into your garden and how you see it and how you see the order or the chaos and whether that's good or bad, which is its own thing. But
I think that is something that I've thought about a lot. The modern architecture started out with the idea that it was form that follows function, right? Like we're going to get rid of all of the ridiculous Victorian
the ornaments.
We're only going to have what's necessary. And so modern architecture followed that. Form follows function. And then we get, very clean lined buildings, very geometric, a lot of use of concrete, all of these things that typify modern architecture. But then somehow there was a funny translation into the garden that said, oh, it has to be static and clean and readable and static, really. There wasn't any appreciation for the dynamism of what plants bring. And so somehow this became married together, that like our ultimate idea of the clean, nice, modern garden is lines that you can readily see, green grass, and only green. I've gone to so many clients, they're like, oh no, I don't want any color. I'm like, I don't understand that. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. So if you had to say right now, what is the avant-garde in garden design? What is the leading edge? What would you say is the leading edge in garden design?
Does it have to be one leading edge?
What's that?
It has to be one leading edge. I think maybe the, I don't know, the...
Are you going to get super philosophical right now?
Right. No, but...
With your philosophy of science degree.
There shouldn't be one leading edge, right? If we can predict it, if we can see what it is, then it's not going to be the avant-garde, right? It's going to be a number of threads. It's going to be this like incredible tentacled thing that
exactly
is weaving and being really creepy and weird around the perfect lawn, around the expected. I mean, I think that Nigel Dunnett's Super Bloom work is incredible, but is it the leading edge anymore? Are heavy seedscapes into sand plantings the leading edge? Or, I mean, it's existed already for decades, when we look at it. So can we even say this is the leading edge, or is this just something that's awesome? Really interesting. We can still appreciate things that aren't exactly,
Is it do you think, is it the leading edge?
No, I think it's actually a very acceptable, beautiful form of gardening that, I don't know, I kind of thought about this when we were like thinking about what could be the leading edge, and I think we can point out possible trends for the future or ways to act, but I've seen so many incredible talks in recent years about how you can trace back naturalistic design movements and wild plant appreciation movements and all these things that we consider to be still on the fringe of accepted horticulture. You can trace them back hundreds of years, right?
Absolutely.
So it's like, right, so we're still kind of just revisiting old preferences. We're always kind of caught in these cycles. So, maybe we're falling off of some of the Dunnett peaks like you're showing right now, but we're falling and kind of circling back into something else. We should let the modern architects have modern garden design. We can find new words, like we can move away from it. That is modern garden design, and maybe we hate it. So we don't need to equate modern with avant-garde anymore, right?
Completely. I think, isn't that the way, though? I mean, you could look about, there is nothing new under the sun is maybe another way to say it. I mean, the avant-garde, okay.
Much more succinct, yeah, thank you. Yeah.
The Dadaists, or I mean, I think you can probably see that with any movement that considers themselves super new, super revolutionary. But I would say that this is not really acceptable to most people.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think the piece of that comes down to what your exposure to gardening is.
Yeah.
Because if you're a gardener that is like operating at a very high level and you're very aware of trends in high-level gardening circles, it's not going to feel very new. But maybe if you're a new gardener and you see like the chaos garden down the street, that might feel very avant-garde to you.
I think that can we imagine any public spaces like this aside from Kevin's streetscape on York? Can we imagine any public spaces like that? I mean, because I don't see this.
Yeah, well, I think that's maybe one of the first punctures, right? One of the first edges that we could talk about are challenging spaces. And looking at something like this could definitely be deemed challenging, like Bryan said, as your familiarity with gardens or gardening or your ability to read a landscape or a garden plan varies, you might find this much more challenging than someone else. I think there's a term I love from architecture, which is hostile architecture, right? Which is actually kind of a shitty thing. I'm sorry, can I swear? What was the...
Beep.
Okay? Yeah.
Beep.
Cruddy thing.
Crappy.
A
How about
crappy.
that? That's,
Crappy.
yeah,
Thank
crappy.
you, yeah.
That
Yeah,
works.
because a lot of it implies architecture that's hostile against human, right, habitation, and it's often employed against unhoused peoples in public areas.
Yes.
But hostile horticulture can also be a pretty fun and new leading thing, right? Not necessarily meaning that it's hostile against people particularly, but it could be something that assaults your senses or your sensibilities. It makes you uncomfortable. It makes you question, the intention that's being put into a space. And I think
Stand up
that
and pay
having-
attention, like having
Yes.
to interact with the plant.
Yeah, pay attention, right?
Yeah.
The function of the modern gardens that you were showing before is essentially to disappear,
Yes.
right? To not be
exactly.
considered.
To not consider the plant life.
Yeah, but gardens that force you to consider them, I think, is an
Yeah.
avant-garde idea.
I
And
think it is too.
That's an avant-garde.
That's,
man.
I think one of the things that you said about your streetscape, because how many of you have been to Kevin's streetscape? It's on Josephine Street at DBG. But one of the things he said when he designed it was, I want people to have to interact with plants. That really stuck with me because we are so used, at owning a landscape construction and design business, we get complaints. The shrub was 1 inch over the sidewalk. We're like, okay, well, come and trim it.
We'll
right?
come and contain that.
Yeah,
life
we'll
form
come
for
in.
you.
Sorry. But I loved that. You said, you have to contend with it. But then I did see an Instagram reel of somebody who was not kind about that.
Oh no, it's still causes a lot of problems in the community. People are offended by it.
Yes.
If a plant leans slightly over the sidewalk, it's a danger to their full existence.
Their full,
Yeah.
domain. Their domain over, right?
And I will say that we do try to keep everything accessible.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that we're not serving just some type of people with certain mobilities. We
Yeah.
want to make sure that it's accessible
Yes,
from
of
everyone.
course.
But we also kind of evaluate, is this fully blocking a view of something or is it partially screening?
Yes.
Like, can
More of a
we
preference thing.
can we challenge somebody to, look at and through the garden
Yes.
instead of just feeling like it's something in the way?
Yes, it's in the way and impeding their movement. So maybe is that one leading edge? Plants that people have to consider?
Yeah.
Spaces where plants take
Center stage.
center
really.
stage. I wasn't
Sure.
going to say primacy, but just
Yeah.
more than just being out of the way.
They're not the wallpaper. They're the
They're
experience.
they're the experience.
Yeah. So then that's the post-human, right, aspect of interacting with gardens, interacting with plants, right? We're kind of forced into considering them as their own entities, their own creatures with intentions and the rights to exist in certain space in the world, right? And if we kind of follow that flow out, we can then kind of see gardens as their own entities that can
Right,
sort of
not
exist
just-
together, right? Not just something that we've
That does
placed
it
there
something for us.
Yeah, for our own purposes.
I think you can get there too, not even, I think there's lots of routes there. It doesn't have to run through post-human philosophy. Because I think, I think I arrived there at a different place of appreciating the other.
Yeah,
Right.
which is the
The other.
basis of post-human philosophy. But
But I think you also, anyway, we can get into philosophy later. Yeah, because it's just saying, we're not the only ones here.
yeah,
And
that's-
plants are playing ecological roles and sustaining roles that are not, they're not there just to, they're not just eye candy.
Right.
Okay,
but here's some eye candy.
okay, these are my slides, and I think everybody did things differently, but I think John Little is another, and he's old too, and he's been around 20 years, so maybe it's not a leading edge. But in the sense that he repurposes materials, might that be a leading edge?
Yes, entirely, I think.
Anybody
Bryan,
want to talk about that?
I think that in some ways repurposing materials is like an old school sensibility.
It's another old school
So
sensibility.
it kind
It's
of
my
circles
mother.
back to your,
No,
like,
clean
talk
out
about-
the plastic
Yeah,
bag.
yeah.
We're not going to throw the plastic bag away.
Exactly. Or like you see old farm implements and old
Yes.
like farm gardens. So there is an angle of that, but doing it with the intent to give it a new purpose in that space does seem new to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I totally agree with that, and I think I'd like to frame it as the inclusion of active and passive materials in the garden.
Inclusion of active and passive
Yeah,
materials.
so including both active materials like plant life that can sort of, act and react on their own, having, their own status as living entities, as we kind of established in the last thread, and then including materials that, can only be sort of acted upon, and they sort of only react mostly in their decay, right? They're not really building
Yes.
in any way. And I think John Little does that absolutely beautifully by finding ways that you can weave a huge diversity of materials into the garden and allowing, which really allows all manner of creatures to act on it, right?
Yeah.
So when we have a garden of just plants, we're serving, no doubt, a huge multitude of biodiversity, but when we start to give structure and space and different materiality, we're serving them in an even wider way, really.
Yes.
Diversity begets diversity.
Yes, diversity
right?
begets diversity.
And in that way, you can sort of leave nothing behind. You can be
Yes.
your own quarry. You can really tap into the landscape that we've made and we exist in, instead
Yeah.
of just turning back to some sort of pre-programmed Edenic state that
Yeah.
doesn't even exist in soil below us.
Exactly. This wall on the right, if you don't know John Little, I would encourage you to go find his Instagram. First of all, he will just make you happy. Will he not? I
Yeah,
play his
incredible
videos
person.
for my
Yeah.
husband who doesn't have Instagram on Saturday mornings, and we both feel happier about our life because John Little has a wonderful attitude about life. But this wall on the right, it was just, you see the pile of rubble that it was before, and it was literally from a dump. And he's talking about all the things that he has in it, and then an amazing craftsman comes and puts it together. It was super inspiring.
Yeah, it's incredible. And for anyone who has walled in the room, that is dry stack. It's not mortared
Yeah,
together, which is
it's dry stacked.
insane.
That is dry stacked. Yeah, which is incredible. And he is always thinking about, which I know you incorporated a lot at Birds and Bees, and I don't know what Spring Creek has, but for pollinators, you have all sorts of deadwood. There's a dead hedge that we created at our conference right outside, if you all want to look at it, which is another, do you want to talk about that? Because that's another new old thing. It's like something that we haven't ever really had in the U.S. I feel like it's a European tradition.
Sure, yeah. The use of hedges and dead hedges, and just the fact that you can't, throw anything away, right? To quote
Yeah,
Apiary Studio, who was
Yeah.
just at your conference right there, the picture. Oh, there we go, perfect.
yeah, Apiary Studio.
They're one of their favorite quotes is, "Don't throw it away. There is no way."
There is no
so,
way.
So finding a way to incorporate and continue to keep all the materials that you sort of produce in your garden or on your property on site as much as possible, and to, weave them back into the ecosystem is I think a huge driving tenet of them, and definitely, John Little is a huge inspiration for all the work that we've done at Denver Botanic in trying to build dead hedges, which are essentially just assemblages of all sorts of sticks and leaves and brush together into different forms, or our dead walls or anything like that. I ripped off John Little 1,000 times for that. It was constantly turning back to him as sort of the source and inspiration, because a lot of times for a lot of these gardens, maybe one of the most controversial things you can do is give someone permission to do something,
Yeah.
right? When you're seeing the same sort of, the same designers, the same designs, the same modern takeoffs of things, the same plant material offered in catalogs or highlighted online or on reels or whatever, those are kind of the modes you think in. But if you
Yeah.
give anyone permission to go beyond that,
Yeah.
they almost always do, and are surprised
Yeah.
in some way of that. And I think people like Apiary and John Little are in the business of giving people permission even to revisit old ideas.
Yeah. Yeah, really old ideas. Apiary is in Philadelphia, and they just talked about the fact that when you're digging in Philadelphia, you are just going to be digging up concrete, brick. You're going to be digging, and so many of their projects, the project before, that was all from the site. They brought nothing in. It was all from the site that was just found there. And they said, go ahead.
I I had a non sequitur.
Oh, no, it's okay.
Go through.
We like non
I was going to
sequiturs.
say that if you go back to the last picture, so that Perrystead Dairy, something that Apiary didn't mention in their talk is that there's actually a cheese vending machine in that garden, which is just amazing. And the inspiration for the garden there was that they wanted to use a lot of aromatics and Mediterranean and Mediterranean adapted plants to sort of in some way maybe influence the cheese making.
Yeah.
And for those as inclusions.
Yeah.
But they said also that building is completely sterile.
Yes.
The cheesemonger, and they were not allowed
Yes.
inside at all.
Yeah.
But you totally get that. I mean, I think that's a wonderful way to weave a story through a space, which I
Yes.
think is also something that maybe we've lost a little
Yes.
bit in garden design, is coming to it with concepts and storylines and letting it be incredibly bespoke to the space that you are working in. And
Yeah.
the fact that they considered the flavor and the sensory sensations as people were going to approach their cheese purchasing was just genius.
It was. It was. And so responsive to where they were and the context in which they were designing. Do you know this? Do you guys know him?
I know of him. I haven't met him. I've seen a
Okay.
lot of his work online.
Do you know him?
No, just on Instagram.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
he's our friend on Instagram, and I think his garden is really cool. This is in North Carolina.
I think he's based in North Carolina.
Yeah, so it's not what you normally think of in North Carolina, but I think, I don't know, I think it dovetails with one of your leading edges of, it feels to me when I see this garden, like you have to contend with it.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, and it's, I mean, I find these places inspiring that are just in regular neighborhoods that, oh, and then look, because it really, this is so much more interesting than sod. Do you know that sod is our largest crop in the US? I think it's 80 million acres.
You can say any number there, I'll just nod along.
Yeah, no, I fell down a rabbit hole reading about our obsession
100
with
million.
sod, and I had all the facts and figures. It was like 30 million gallons of pesticides. I mean, it's unbelievable, but why wouldn't you want that and not the other? Okay, this isn't on just repeat. I think maybe if we want to put it so that it can do that, how do I do that? Anyway, I'm just advancing. This is somebody
Yeah,
else
feel
I
free
like.
to roll with it. I think we'd have to restart it to do that.
More leading edges. What's another leading edge? Or should we move on to our next question?
I think one thing that's actually coming up more and more is an appreciation for plant forms that are keystones in different ecosystems that are not trees. And I think you guys are doing a really good job of that. I think we've already seen it with prairies and grasses, and I feel like people are finally waking up to like, there's more than a tree and a grass that can go in a garden or like be the star.
Hey,
Or
there's
be the
shrubs.
Be the foundation of an ecosystem like it actually is in nature. Like the sagebrush steppe is like the biggest contiguous ecosystem in the West. So it's like very cool to finally see that getting showcased in other places.
So if you all don't know, Kevin and his colleague Michael Guidi just wrote a book together, which was named one of the top 10 books of the decade in garden design. And it's called Shrouded in Light, and if you haven't read it, you should. It's very, so much to think about. But, okay, I think you're right. I think shrubs are a leading edge. Go ahead, riff.
Thanks.
It's your chance.
Yeah, this is me.
Come on.
Justin, do you have the book for sale?
You did it. You set him up so well.
Are we making sales here? Yeah.
It's really great.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the plug. Yeah, our book, Shrouded in Light, explores the potential for wild shrublands to inspire naturalistic design. And like Bryan said, is really trying to look at other keystone species or other plant morphology, specifically how shrubs can really help with not just Western landscapes and our associated biome, but obviously steppes and deserts and Mediterranean regions, but really these shrub plant communities extend all throughout and at the edges of forests and grasslands throughout bioregions across the world. And also because shrubs are kind of weird things that people have kind of weird relationships with, it opens up a whole,
Yeah, let's talk
we
about
think
that.
really channels of philosophy and artistic influence that you can really kind of use to explore and sort of puncture into the inherent culture of shrubs. So,
Bryan and I both grew up in Colorado. We were born and raised here, yeah, both of us. And it's only been in like the last 20 years that we have succumbed to the disease of hedging every shrub that is met. Have you noticed this? When we grew up, it was not like that in Colorado. We weren't that cool.
I feel like I remember my mom doing that when I was a
Do
kid.
you?
Yeah, we're guilty.
Oh, sorry. Could we stop doing that? Could we all make an agreement to stop hedging shrubs ad nauseum? Could they just be what they are?
So much of it's about finding the right size of plant, which
Exactly.
people don't love doing.
I think there are a lot of cues that exist in a well-hedged shrub, though.
Okay.
But I think that we're probably hedging for the wrong reason. But maybe it's like this. Maybe it's like this. This deep impulse, that we're following, but we don't really know why. But you know what? Some of the most intensely hedged and pruned shrubs I've ever seen have been in the wild.
Okay.
Because they're
Fair
done,
point.
Because they're done by grazing elk, right? Or things like
Amazing.
that. And the idea of this sort of like pruned down shrubland that we encounter could in fact be, a cue that there's huntable animals nearby, right? Or that there's sort of these rich berry lands. I don't think we necessarily like realize that, but that's just one of the theories we throw out, make people feel a little bit better.
Are you saying
about their
that this is
shrubbles.
okay? I am so done with every time a lilac blooms. How about on 9th Street in Longmont? Every time the lilacs bloom, come and just mow them down. Why? Why can't we just let them do what they're doing?
Sure. I mean, I think there's the other side to that, right? Which is the plants being perceived as nuisances, right?
Yes.
In expressing like their full life forms.
Yes.
Or their full life cycles.
Yes.
We use only male trees, which causes the pollen
Yes.
apocalypse because we don't want to have fruit.
We don't want
on the
fruit.
ground, right?
Yes.
Yeah. We don't want fruit anymore.
Yes.
We don't want to eat. We don't want to get fruit from the trees on
Yes.
the streets, right? We want to get it from Walmart Supercenter. Or
Yes.
whatever.
Yes.
Or Costco,
Yes.
right? So yeah, I think yes, we can probably like find fun threads into like why we do everything we do and find some justification. But the truth is, we just hate plants.
Yeah, that's the truth.
We do, yeah.
It's the truth. It's the truth. And everybody, we are trying to rectify this. No, there are other ways to prune shrubs besides taking a hedge trimmer to them because they don't want to grow that way. I'm sorry, Fallujah does not want to grow that way, Kevin.
No.
Oh man, but you can cut fallujah to the ground.
The resprouter.
And it's a resprouter. It is a resprouter.
I feel that I should, since I put words on mine, I feel like I should mention why this was inspiring me. Maybe this is a little bit of a thread because we came upon this garden in Minorca, which is a Balearic island, so it's a sister of Mallorca, which maybe people have heard of more. But this was something that I thought sort of connected. It's like going back to the past. It's an ancient quarry, and after they were done quarrying it, they planted plants. So it's like reused material. It's mostly shrubs. It's no water. I mean, it was just so incredible
Super interesting idea.
to visit. And I don't know. I guess that's become kind of a thread that we've been talking about, like going back to the past as a way forward. Okay,
Oh,
these are,
This is my slide.
yeah, okay, good, talk about it.
So this is a photo of my prairie garden, and I have a second one later in the series because I thought it's not super avant-garde at this point, but it's kind of interesting to talk about plant patterning. Could you, if we're not going to make the audience sick, could we back up to that first one?
Yeah, do it.
You can look away if you're going to get sick. I like to talk about plant patterning when I talk about naturalistic gardens because I think it's a really easy way to capture a little bit of what you see in nature and bring it home. So in this photo, this is looking through the short grass portion of my prairie, so it's an underpinning of low-growing grasses. And I settled on this arrangement of the little shrublets are snakeweed and pointed them at the bench kind of in two different waves that push and pull from one another. Actually because of a natural space that I spent a lot of time in, and we'll see that later in the slideshow. But I think that just visiting natural spaces is one of the most interesting ways to get informed on how you want to work with your own landscape and take things home to it. So I thought it was an interesting point.
That's a really good point. And it kind of gets to, we've already sort of touched on it, but one of my colors was, why is it that monochrome colors and monochrome plant material and rigid symmetrical lines are what people think of in modern design? And it's sort of, I do still think it's a leading edge to say, hey, we should look at what's growing around us and think about how we can translate that into our spaces. I still think that's kind of a leading edge for a lot of people. It's not for you guys, because you're at public gardens, but
The Kevins of the world.
what's that?
The Kevins of the world.
But it seems like for the larger public, that's still a leading edge.
Yeah, I think it is.
Look at natural spaces, just like what you said. I mean, it seems completely intuitive on the face of it, and yet we don't really observe our natural spaces, I don't think, right? We tend to see it as,
Or we observe them superficially.
yeah,
And I think the best way to learn how to use a plant in your garden is to really spend time with it in nature and in the garden. And you'll kind of see its biology and its patterning better, and that makes it a lot easier to use it in a way that it's actually going to work with you on it, because otherwise you're going to end up fighting it. I don't know where this other photo went. We'll get there eventually.
it's coming.
Did you have another question you wanted to pose?
What do you think are the biggest trends? So, okay, I think should we recap what we've said so
Yeah,
far?
we covered a lot of that already.
So we've said leading edge is plants as agents in themselves. Plants you have to contend with, gardens you have to contend with. Reusing materials, thinking not just about the living material, but also the acted upon material, and thinking about it in new ways rather than just saying clean slate, go to Colorado Materials, pick out your, not that you shouldn't go to Colorado Materials, they're a great company, but pick out your materials, but maybe we can think more creatively about what we already have, repurposing what's already on our sites.
Great, yeah.
I was just talking to somebody, just a friend who has converted his yard into Bootalua mainly. He loves Bootalua. I was like, that's great. Go with it. Bootalua is our state grass, blonde ambition. I don't know if you guys all know that. Anyway, he was like, oh my gosh, it creates so much waste. And I said, oh, here's a great thing you can do. Just gather it all out, put it on your driveway, and then mow over it, and then you can put it back on the garden.
Right.
Which we're like, yeah, but I mean, a lot of people aren't, people don't think about that. They still bag it up, and that's another
sure.
thing of reusing, right? And it comes out to be a teeny amount.
I mean, if you
once
could
do
burn
all
it, that'd
that.
be great, but you might,
I know.
that might not go over so well
I
these
do that
days.
at my house. I burn it at my house. Don't tell anybody. So those are three of them. And then is it observing natural spaces, seeing natural spaces as our friend Thomas Rayner says, we should garden the wild and wild our garden, which is a little bit what you were talking about. So seeing natural spaces as,
Blurring those lines a little
Yeah.
bit, yeah. Yeah, I also think that something that we are gonna see that maybe we haven't seen a lot of is a push towards a percentage of people choosing to garden with no irrigation. I've been hearing more about that in my circles recently, and I think that there are compelling arguments for it because you have fewer weeds, plants grow more slowly, so there's less material to remove from the garden. Things change less quickly, it's less work for the gardener as a whole, and you're just using fewer resources. I don't think it'll ever go super mainstream, but I think that we're gonna see more of it. And I had one other thing that I thought about for this.
so but they're not doing that from the start. Are they doing that from the start?
I think
here?
a percentage of people are. I think it's really
Because they're only
fringe right now.
planting in the spring?
Yeah, like as an establishment thing, and then
Yeah.
you're just done with it.
Talk about a challenging garden. I mean,
Yeah,
that's,
right.
Yeah.
that's incredible, right? And I usually, in my home gardens, I have watered to establishment,
Right.
which usually means the first season or part of the first season, and then I might lose interest or I get busy and I kind of forget about things, and you see them die back, and hopefully you see them come back next year. But I think for a lot of people, breaking the habit of having something to constantly care for, to tend, or to follow sort of blind guidelines,
Yeah.
right? Of like watering on a cycle, watering on a schedule, mulching in a certain way, is probably very much a leading edge because it's gonna be really hard to do.
Yeah.
Breaking our own,
Yeah,
seasonal
our
stuff.
own need
breaking
for
our
this.
own compulsions and our needs
Yeah.
to even go in and interact with a garden in some ways,
Right.
or to keep it looking the same,
Yeah. Right.
and not let it have a dynamic flow over a 5 to 10 year range and really change is.
I think
is
that's a
pretty
leading
hard.
edge,
Sure.
dynamic change. Because so much, at least in the industry, so much is keeping things maintained the way they were ad nauseum, that is not something that people are comfortable with, right? That the shrub's going to get huge and it will change and it will shade out some of the species you really liked, and that's okay.
And that's the core of what a garden is, in my opinion.
Dynamic.
Yeah, people argue otherwise, but if your garden doesn't have a life trajectory, it's not really operating as like a system.
Exactly.
It should, like, you should have a clear phase of juvenility with more short-lived plants filling spaces and things maturing and things coming in and shading as it gets more mature. And then shifting towards more shade communities, which means you have to water more. Or you're removing stuff. That's a big part of it too, but it's iterative.
Or you let things die.
Yeah, you don't have a living room out there.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like this is something that we're always trying to educate clients on is, these things change. That's what's
Kind of the point.
inherently beautiful about it, is that it changes. Oh, shrubs are another leading edge.
There you go.
There you go. Kevin's on the avant-garde.
Yeah. So, I mean, how do we couch that, or how do we get to like the root of what caused that expectation that these gardens are unchanging or ever, that they're sort of predictable, packaged, delivered, and the same? I mean, is that a symptom of like corporate America, right? It's like you get the same Big Mac from Anchorage to Albany, and like.
I think it's even older than that. I think
Do
it's
you?
the desire for a control over a space, and I think it also comes out of a little bit of like the European aristocracy. Like, we're going to have a staff that takes care of the lawn,
Yes.
and it's going to look that way,
Yes.
and the hedgerows are going to look this
Yes.
way. And suddenly, when everybody can have a lawn, you're emulating that, whether you know it or not.
For sure.
I think on some level.
I read a whole history of the lawn. Really, I read 5 books on this. They talked about the influence of Monticello and Mount Vernon on the American psyche. They brought the grasses in from Britain, or it's Britain and Germany, I think, right? And then they had people to cut the grass by hand.
Right.
And this woman, I think it must have been her doctoral thesis or something, because she traces like the movement of these pictures around and how this starts to become the vision of what it means to be wealthy, right? And it's unchanging.
It's using your land for something you can't eat.
Yeah,
It's a big core of it.
exactly.
Look, we can afford to waste our land.
Exactly, we can afford to waste our land and pay people to maintain it. So she shows that like, yeah, it very much becomes a status symbol. And then there was an unholy alliance between the U.S. Agriculture Department and Southern Gulf course owners that really pushed the development of sod and for it to live. And yeah, now we have, it is very much status though. It's wrapped up in status, right? Because it seems like if you can maintain something, that's more desirable.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. And it became something that we could all attain when,
Yes.
right, with
The democratization of this.
right, with,
Yeah.
well, with the rise of suburbia and the
Yeah.
collapse of, family farms in rural
Yes.
areas.
Yeah.
But yeah, so maybe not wasting your land is a leading edge in garden design.
I think that's
right?
great.
Not
Using
wasting
everything
your
for something.
land.
Yeah. And I do think like the glorification of plant forms that are not what we expect.
Yeah.
Like, embrace what's around you. It doesn't have to be even the ecosystem type, but like if you're living on the steppe, grow cushion plants and shrubs and see what you can do with it. You'll find an interesting new way to do it, I think.
How do you think homeowners can incorporate some of these leading edge ideas into their own yards? You just gave actually a really great example.
Mm-hmm.
How else?
I think some of that depends on how involved they want to be, because not everyone wants a big wild garden. Maybe you want lawn for your kids to play and you want edges that do that. And you can replace some of the shrubs as analogs with things that are more local, but that's not really like a concept change as much as it is a substitution. So I would say that's like the low hanging fruit if you're
Yeah.
interested.
Just
But you're
use
not
some
wanting to have to like
well-adapted
overhaul
plants.
the whole yard.
Just do it. Just make a weird pile somewhere in your yard of all your all your stuff, look at it, let it change, see how it changes you, see what grows in it and through it. Sometimes just like giving yourself that quadrat to experiment with or to be surprised by, is enough to set off a chain reaction kind of everywhere else.
Be the leading edge in your neighborhood.
Yeah, be the leader, be the leading edge, be the weirdo.
Yeah, that's basically it, be the weirdo.
Yeah, get the county to come look at, to tell you your lawn is a nuisance.
We've tried to start encouraging people, hey, you don't have to pick every weed. Because weeds are a little bit a matter of perspective. So we've told our clients what we think are good weeds. Just leave them.
And some weeds are still using resources and filling a space.
Exactly.
If they're not
That's why they're
seeding or
good.
causing a problem necessarily, like they're still using a void, like they're filling it up.
They're covering the soil.
Yeah,
They're providing
which
a good
provides
service.
ecosystem services too.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Don't
black and
see
white.
every weed as something that needs to be taken out. I mean, I hate bindweed, but I feel comforted by bindweed. Because if there's a nuclear apocalypse, it's gonna cover the earth again, right?
It would be good, yeah.
It will still be there.
Bindweed and cockroaches. You're set.
Another question I have is, where do you go for inspiration to find new ideas to think about in garden design?
The Longmont Museum.
Wait,
How'd we cycle back
how
to
did that
yours?
happen? Get back?
Uh-oh.
Oh no.
I don't dare just start clicking at that rate.
Yeah, click it fast.
All right,
It's avant-garde.
Yeah,
We're probably like 20, 30 minutes in. Does anyone
I think it's time for your slides.
feel like
Thank you,
this
yeah.
is avant-garde yet? Have we gotten there?
Have I convinced you that this is not avant-garde? This is not avant-garde.
Okay, I'm just gonna do it. Bear with me.
Yeah, it's like a recap. It's like a strobe light.
Yeah.
Where do you go for inspiration?
Are we missing Kevin's slides?
Yeah.
That's cool. Honestly though, I do go to a lot of museums, a lot of art museums, for inspiration for garden design, and not necessarily just to look at paintings of Versailles, but looking at all sort of different genres and media. I think can be incredibly insightful, not just sort of compositionally, but to read about artist statements and read the intents and see why someone was sort of intentionally creating this piece, what is really the concept behind it, and how could I consider some of those same strategies when I'm putting a garden together. I think probably one of the most influential things on me in the past 5 to 10 years was the Meow Wolf Art Collective installations. So I don't know if anyone been to Meow Wolf or any Meow Wolf, Convergence Station, House of Eternal Return, Omega Mart. I'm obviously a super fan here, but what really I think helped me think about the way I wanted to design gardens and build spaces was seeing the type of worlds that they built in those places, right? When you enter into one of their spaces, you're completely immersed in a world that has its own style, its own story, its own color palette, its own atmosphere about it. And I really wanted to think about the spaces that I was making as possibly having that impact on someone who entered them. And not just sort of, I think, both.
Immersive.
Yeah, immersive. And I think as someone who identifies as a naturalistic gardener or a naturalistic garden designer, I think that it's often, although some of the best work we can do as an ecological designer or designers is to go out and emulate something that you see in the wild or in the natural world. But I think we also sometimes use it as this skin of thinking that's good enough. Right?
Yeah.
And so infusing a bit more of a story into it for me has been a really important way to change the way I'm looking at it. And I definitely think, I trace that back directly to Meow Wolf. Because the first time I went to one, I was like, oh my God, this is the way I played in my head as a kid, but now I'm just here, right? And that
love
was,
that.
yeah, that was such a magical feeling. And I was like, I want people to feel
Yeah.
that magic if I could
Yeah.
approximate that.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. And something that I did not expect is that when I work on any of my gardens, the way that I approach it is by going out in nature and observing what I feel in a space and like what I like about the feeling and what I want to bring back
Capture.
to whatever I'm working on. And I come back, I kind of observe the plant patterning and why the plant patterning and the landscape give that feeling. And then I try to emulate the feeling with the plant patterning and whatever else, like textural elements or like some other piece. Sometimes it's not any of that stuff. And it's just like, I'm going to use other plants to do it. It's going to look different, but it's about emulating some feeling that I liked about the space that I want someone else to feel when they walk into that space.
It's interesting, we figured out that we're all musicians because the immersive quality that you're talking about, I think that's the thing about music that I always want. It's immersive, right? And I think in design, for me, I've always thought about rhythm, like the rhythmic aspect of visual rhythm, but rhythm also is that immersive piece where you're feeling it right in your core, right? That it permeates you. It's not even the harmonies you still hear, but the rhythm permeates, like it gets to your core. So, but I think also there's an element of immersiveness that we're all searching for in whether it be an immersive art experience, music, dance. I mean, I think the movement, right? I mean, dance has been super inspiring to me as a designer, just thinking about, I mean, it's that rhythmic and movement piece.
Yeah, the piece you don't have to think about, you just experience it.
You experience. It's embodied, it's experiential. It's not static and closed off.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
I like that. This is just a silly question, and then maybe we can go to some questions from the audience. But what's your favorite plant right now?
Do you have a favorite right now?
It's like asking who's your favorite
This is a very hard
child.
question, yeah.
Yeah.
Every time I get asked it, it's like,
I know it's a stupid question, but it's,
What's your favorite child? Just kidding.
I don't have one.
Perfect. Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go. That's the,
I don't
that's
have
the
one.
answer. That's the answer. So I was just hiking in Utah this past weekend, and the Berberis Fremontii was going nuts, which I don't know if y'all are familiar with that at all, but it's a incredible, like, blue-leaved, spiny shrub with
It's amazing.
incredible yellow flowers, and which turn into, like,
they're fragrant too.
they're fragrant, yep, and they turn into have this incredible red fruit. It looks like Christmas, like all the time. It's just
It looks like a plant someone made up.
yeah.
Like they just
Yeah,
took all the
it
weirdest
certainly
parts
can't
of
be
like
real.
4 different plants and put them together in one.
So many of the
That's
southwestern plants just seem like made up plants.
They
It's
do.
like, yeah.
They really do seem like made-up plants.
Yeah, there's a big
Dr.
Twizzler in the
Seuss.
landscape.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
incredible.
It's Dr. Seuss. Okay, what's your?
I would say right now it's Geum triflorum, which is prairie smoke.
I was gonna say,
Really,
but I have another one in the
it's
same
like the
category.
plant. It's like the plant of the week. You
I know it's true.
It's blooming right now.
It's
It has
true.
these cool nodding flowers that have like a dusty patina on them, and they're bumblebee pollinated. A lot of our really early flowers rely on bumblebees to pollinate them because the bumblebees have big bodies and they're good at working in the cold, so they can get out. And the flowers are really tight, so the bumblebee has to like force its way in and vibrate the flower to get the pollen to go to the next one.
So, excuse me, could you say the name again?
Prairie smoke. Yep, and it's called that because after it blooms, it makes like these really cool, like truffula tree poofies on the top.
It's almost better than even when it's blooming.
It's better than when it's blooming.
Yeah.
It's a really cool
It's
plant.
like Fallujah.
Yes.
Well, mine is pasque flower because it's blooming in my garden right now, and it has that similar quality I like it out of bloom more than I like it in bloom.
Yeah, I agree.
I love its structure after it blooms.
It's
I
great
just went and
bathroom,
cut a
too.
bunch of it and put it in my house because
Does it self-seed for you?
it hasn't yet.
It does for us.
Does it?
Quite a bit, yeah. The
Which
European
one?
European one.
Oh,
does.
that's the one I have.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's nice.
nice.
Berberis Fremontii.
Desert holly.
What's the common name?
I would call it desert holly. But there are 2 desert hollies. You need to know which one.
You got to know your Latin. You got to
I
know
don't
your
know
Latin.
which one it is.
Well, that was fun. That was really fun. We should ask this question. It's every month. What's your favorite plant,
I
right?
think-
Because it changes.
Yeah, that's what you gotta do it like based on a time frame.
Yeah. Are we ready for questions, Justin? We have no idea how much time it's been.
It's too bad you didn't see my slides. They were awesome.
What's that?
I said, it's too bad you didn't see my
but
slides.
are they
were
here?
incredible.
Do you think that they're not here, Brian?
I went through them. You can click through them.
No, I trust you. Yeah. You were going backwards.
You
when
have the
got,
best
when you got
slides.
to the weird one.
Kevin has definitely the best slides. At our conference, Kevin was complimented by our professional photographer because she said your pictures are so amazing. Didn't I hear her say that to you?
And I think I told her they were all Michael's pictures. And that was it, yeah.
Where are they? People want to see.
Maybe we can post them somehow, or maybe you can go to your Instagram page.
That's what you should do.
Go to his Instagram page. Should we switch over to Q&A?
Are you ready for Q&A?
Yeah. Are you ready?
Are you guys ready?
You guys ready to answer some questions? Depends on the question, right?
Any
Okay.
question?
We are recording. We're actually live streaming this evening, so if you could wait for the mic to come to you.
In terms of, what's a leading edge approach to gardening, what about plant-driven design? Which was the title of a book that Lauren Springer and Scott Ogden wrote and published years ago. But I haven't heard anybody use that phrase.
Maybe because we're taking it for granted because that's what all of us are doing. So I don't know if is it a leading edge? Because that's the new naturalist, the new perennialists, right? That like we're all firmly convinced it's what Brian was sort of talking about, though, moving into not just forbs and grasses, but also other species.
I almost think we still are engaging in what people would call plant-driven design, but we're not calling it plant-driven design. We're kind of like what you're saying. And I think it's still happening, but it's not using the same term. We're throwing other terms around more than I hear that by far.
I just did a plant select webinar, and I did call it plant-driven design because it's on our moniker for our business.
Because I also noticed that when you talked about what is a garden, nobody said anything about plants being part of a garden. That a space that has plants in it being a garden.
Ooh, now that's fun. I think maybe we took that for granted again, but also maybe we're swinging back to the place where plants don't need to be part of a garden, right? If to garden is really to control a space into a certain form with our own intention, maybe plants don't need to be a part of it anymore, especially if we're gardening for other creatures. I think we've been finding recently that things like the deadhead structures are just as important in providing shelter and habitat as plants are in providing things like nectar and pollen. So I think maybe a leading edge would be to challenge whether or not we do need plants in a garden. Not that I would do that or advocate for it. I love plants. I'm a plant person first, but I think it opens up, an interesting idea and conversation.
Thank you. That's all very interesting. And I encourage you to use your microphones closer to your mouths.
Right on, thank you.
That's a great tip.
Some cities are offering money to people who take out lawns or partial lawns and put more interesting plantings in. Has there been any talk of Longmont actually coming into the modern world in that?
We could all petition them for that. I don't think Longmont's doing it. We know most of the, are they doing it? Fort Collins has been a leader in this. And so has Aurora. We helped a homeowners association, well, we're still in the process, but a homeowners association convert 4 acres of sod to seeded meadow. We're doing it actually right across from DBG, where I still think, you said it's not a leading edge, I kind of still think it is. Seeding, using seeds rather than plants, because seeding is far more affordable for huge areas. We're actually doing it at a homeowners association in Fort Collins. We're going to convert, I think, 11,000 square feet of sod to seeded meadows. And I think that still is, it's not a leading edge in garden design circles because people have been doing it, like Kevin said, for 20 years, but it hasn't yet trickled into the mainstream. And I think out here, we don't need to put any more sod in anywhere. Like, I mean, I have it for my children. Yes, you can have it for your children. But it's just a space holder. Why do we have to do that? Why can't we seed these areas that nobody's walking on, that only get watered? Why can't we do that? I think it's a leading edge for municipalities.
I actually was going to talk about the seed thing and kind of spaced it, but I really think increasingly with the way that the economy has changed and the way it's working or not working for people, we're going to see more and more gardens going in with seed just because that's what people can afford to do. And people increasingly are going to have to get smaller starts from whatever nursery is near them rather than getting big number ones. And increasingly nurseries are going out of business for a variety of reasons. So it's even more important that if you're able, support your local nursery and work with them and their expertise in your area. They know your plants and value them when you have them, because a lot of these nurseries, and we've seen a big contraction here on the Front Range, may not exist in another 20 years. And it's a downer, but it's reality.
Yeah, I definitely talk to your local nursery owner, your local grower. Tell them what you want, what you are going to buy. They'll most likely grow crops that you want. That otherwise,
you're going to learn new cool stuff that you could be growing that you're
yes,
not.
yeah. Otherwise, a lot of the nursery, well, I'd say otherwise a lot of nurseries sort of rely on trends, and maybe to tie it back to your question, to some of these programs that are advocating for certain plants to be in the landscape. And although I think those programs are incredible, I'd say continue to push the boundaries of what they allow and what they'll refund you for. A lot of these programs will not support a seeded project. A lot of them have very strict mulch requirements, oftentimes which are not necessarily aligned to Front Range climates, right? Because these programs are sometimes modeled off of other municipalities. So I'd say just continue to have that conversation with your municipality about the water-wise design you want to put in, and that you still want that rebate, and it's going to really help you to convert that space. Because I've definitely run into, I live under Thornton water, and I have a completely xeric property with dozens of species that bloom in constant rotation, and I don't qualify at all for their long replacement program.
Yeah, that's crazy. I was going to say another leading edge is our understandings of soil, right? I mean, soil and mulching, that soil, we no longer amend soil. Sure. We don't amend soil when we're planting our plants. Yep. Because plants that grow here are happy with our soils. They don't want. And you destroy so much of the microfungal content and everything else by tilling. I mean, this is all, stuff that is kind of known in research places and in universities and public gardens, but it's not known in the wider public. You don't need to be mending your soil for our plants.
Yeah, if you're picking plants that are suited to your site, definitely. And what people often forget too is that most organic amendments break down in the soil because they're broken down by soil microbes. So even if you have amended really well, the benefits of that amendment are going to be significantly reduced in a few years unless you're re-amending, which no one does with their big shrub border or their really dense perennial garden, but very few people do. So it really does behoove people to change the plants, not the site. We're getting kind of on a
Does
tangent,
anyone
but-
have information about what the city of Longmont is currently offering in terms of incentives to homeowners? It's in the city newsletter. Oh, here we go.
I don't know about the city, but Resource Central out of Boulder will allow you a 200, if you take out 200 square feet, I believe, but I'm not sure about the city.
Oh, here we go.
I read in, I think it's the April city newsletter, that they have a very small ad about it, that they will subsidize the removal of sod for the first 454 square feet.
That's a very specific
It's a
number.
great number. I don't know what it means, but, and so you end up paying $1 instead of $3.55, or, you know, whatever the normal cost per square foot would be for the removal of that sod. And then if you want more sod taken out, I think goes up to $2 a square foot instead of just, you know, $1 that you pay. So, but then they also dictate, I think they also say you have to plant 50% of that area in their plant palette that they give you, that it's, you know, water-wise, et cetera. But I asked if we could hardscape it, and they said, no, you can't hardscape it. You have to put 50% of that space back in, you know, specific plants. So anyway, it's a good program, I think, but like you were saying, Kevin, I think it's worth pushing them on some of the details.
We are about to replace all of our turf with water-wise plants this summer, and it's a little scary. I just saw the design last night, and I'm wondering if you have ideas or suggestions on getting my neighbors to drink the Kool-Aid, because I'm anticipating that we live in an area that everyone has a certain percentage of manicured turf, and ours is going to be gone.
Yay for you. Good job. It's really exciting. I can give you lots of books to read if you want a reading list on why this is a good idea. There always has to be one person on the street to try it. I think they'll just see the dynamism of your yard and say, this is amazing. And then you can start cataloging all of the pollinators that you're going to have. We did go to a client this week who said, I want no insects.
Have you considered plastic at that rate?
And I said,
AstroTurf.
oh, a good thing I wasn't there, because I would have given him a lecture, which probably wouldn't have helped us to make a sale. The other person's, our other designer said, well, we'll just cross that bridge when we come to it. But I mean, this is crazy, where we have to steward the land that we have and making it pollinator friendly. I mean, it's just amazing. If everybody starts doing this, somebody has to start so that we can start changing what people see as acceptable. It's still the avant-garde. Nice job.
We have time for maybe one or two more questions.
I did replace my lawn like 10 years ago, so I got no rebates, I got no money. Yeah.
But you got the satisfaction of knowing you did a good thing.
I actually love it. The one thing that I have realized is that because I love the plants so much, that I need more sitting spaces in the yard, more, pathways, and that's something that I think everybody should think about when they do their garden, just like maybe a hardscape where you put a chair so you can watch your plants, because I go around every day and look at my plants and see what they're blooming and stuff. But I will say that I have a friend that went to Xeriscape, and she lives in a kind of expensive neighborhood up by McIntosh Lake, and she got a lot of complaints. She had people calling up the Longmont city code and saying she had weeds in her yard. And she kept going, no, they're plants, they're plants. But the city was very supportive and said we were really into xeriscape and drought tolerant plants and local native plants. So don't worry about it. We're not going to fine you or anything like that. So.
That's great. And thanks for saying xeriscape, not zeroscape, because that's a lot of education we have to do. Xeriscape is not rock. That's not xeriscape. So thank you for using that correctly.
What do you do when you have a couple big trees on your lot? Was that the question?
That's like the notorious dry shade situation that people talk about. It's one of the hardest fixes. You can water more. The trees will soak up a lot of the water. You can mulch deeper. It'll reduce the rate that you lose water at. You can change to a dry shade plant palette, which is pretty limited in terms of what it has in it here, because we are not a shade region. We're very harsh on shade plants. In some instances, you can selectively remove a couple limbs on those trees to get more light into that space, and then you can grow a part shade plant palette. What would you say? Or you? You have anything?
You go first.
I was going to say, for very specific regional inspiration, if you look, sorry, wait.
There you go.
Here I am. For very specific regional inspiration for dry shade, I love to look in the montane plant communities where we do start to get some sort of over canopy. And it turns out that what thrives there are a lot of shrubs. So you can look to great shrubs like creeping Oregon grape holly, Pexistema, what's ours, Mercenites? Juniperus communis. Is also incredible in those communities. So I think there are actually kind of dozens of plants that you can turn to that are actually still kind of common trade plants. So you won't have to go wild collecting for them to actually make that a reality. And of course, I mean, some of our great columbines, we have a lot of carex, so sedges that grow in those regions that all combined with the strategies that Bryan said could create a really lush understory.
That's what I was going to say was carex. Which one? I wasn't going to use Appalachica. I was going to use, what's the one that we have 5 million of at our greenhouse? Carex.
Springelii,
No,
brevior.
no. All of these are great. We're going to try it at a
tons.
site down in Denver that has these catalpa trees that create dense shade. So I've got my fingers crossed that carex is going to be the one. If you don't know about carex, you should. Carex, sedges. They're sedges. But there are so many amazing carex that can perform a lot of these roles.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, and look at like rubus and ribes, so raspberries and currants are also great things. And then you have a nice edible shady garden to wander through and take naps in. Enjoy that shade. I wish I had some shade. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hammocks.
do it. Plant some shrubs. Plant some carex.
I think that's all the time we have. Let's thank Emily Maeda, Bryan Fischer, and Kevin Phillip Williams for joining us. And thank you all for coming. Follow
Thanks.
these guys on Instagram.
Thanks, y'all.